Joining us now, get a little politics in here, a little good news. She's the bearer of good news and gifts today. Liz Peek, you can read Liz Peek, follow her on Twitter, @Liz Peek. You can also follow her columns and her op-eds on The Hill. Go to thehill.com. Liz, from New York, great to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Good morning, and I send my sympathies and concerns to all you guys down in the path of this monster storm. It sounds pretty bad.
It's not the hurricane. It's not like it's got downgraded from 4 to a 2. The problem with the storm is the breadth of it, the depth and breadth. It's so huge in just diameter length, and the fact that it's going to linger off the coast of the Carolinas for 36 hours to 48 hours. So is it going to stay there, dropping what could be up to 3 feet of rain, which none of this area can handle? So that's really what the issue is, and it's going to cause flooding and everything else that could cause in the billions of dollars in damage. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Yeah, no, and as you mentioned, pivoting to politics, frankly, it's going to be a very big opportunity, if you want to look at it that way, for President Trump to, kind of reach out to the people in the region, show competence in his White House, et cetera. It's going to be very important how the White House manages this catastrophe, and I think it can be viewed as a likely catastrophe. His comments yesterday about what a great job they did in Puerto Rico really did not do well. But, this is the kind of time when a president can show up on the scene and kind of make everybody feel good about somebody being in charge and doing a good job and so forth. And frankly, he needs to do that. His approval ratings are not, doing well right now. And President Trump is incredibly important to turn out in the midterm elections and what happens then. So I hope he rises to the occasion, as he often does, and does a good job.
How do you think he's doing so far, Liz?
Well, look, I mean, my biggest issue, and I think the biggest issue for a great many Americans, is the economy, and I am wildly happy with what's going on in the economy. There is absolutely not a single data point that is anything but constructive, and people really should take note of this. It's not just that GDP is growing at 4% in the last quarter and might do better than 3.5% in the current quarter. It's not just profits in the stock market, which are doing well. Wages are finally going up at an accelerated rate. And the big key, John, has been business investment. People don't realize that under Obama, business managers and owners were absolutely terrified that the Obama White House was going to roll out some unpredicted and damaging regulation that would basically clobber any kind of new project that they were undertaking. So businesses didn't undertake new projects. They didn't expand. They didn't invest. And the net result of that, it's a little bit of connect the dots thing. If you don't invest in new plant and equipment, you don't get productivity gains. If you don't get those gains, you don't see higher wages. And finally, beginning about in the fourth quarter of last year, all those things began to fall in place, certainly helped by the tax cuts, but also by the fact that businesses understood that the Trump White House was not going to undermine them with some unpredictable regulation. So, everything is truly humming. Small business managers, according to the latest poll, have never been more optimistic. That is really quite a statement. And the last time the number was even close, it was under Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan's that year, the economy grew at 4.6%. The next year, 7.2%. Astonishing. I don't think they're going to repeat themselves, but there are signs that this economy has yet more accelerating to do. So how it is, frankly, the Republican candidates can't convey that message, can't sell their candidacy on this fact alone. You're doing better than you were before. Remember, I think it was Reagan who asked that question. Are you better off than you were before? And number two, if Democrats take the House, forget any further improvement in the economy. And in fact, they may undertake measures to roll it back.
Exactly. 1980, in the debate with Jimmy Carter, the president ended the first debate by looking in the camera and said, ask yourself, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Now, of course, that was in the midst of the Carter economy's disastrous, where you had the misery index. Remember the misery index, which was, what was that? Inflation and interest rates, and it was topping 25%. I mean, it was an enormous. You go back to those times, and people forget interest rates were like 15%, right? Remember that?
Oh, it was horrible. And, there were basically the same kind of issues were in the headlines then as now. Do lower taxes actually help anybody but the rich? Mm-hmm. And the answer was yes, because the economy went on to grow rapidly and basically provided improving income opportunities for everybody, and that's what's happening now. I mean, honestly, I wish you and I were running for office, because this is not a hard case to make. A rising tide lifts all boats, and that is what's happening. It's not. And by the way, when Nancy Pelosi talks about that wage gains being not much better than inflation, she's correct, but that completely masks what's really going on. The average hourly wage is going up modestly, a little bit better than inflation, but there are hundreds of thousands of people, millions now, have moved up to better jobs because better jobs have become available. The reason that wage number isn't more robust, in my view, and actually the Council of Economic Advisors just put out something effectively saying the same thing, is that you have an awful lot of people coming into the workplace who are going to be earning minimum wage. A lot of people, like, frankly, convicted felons, people without high school degrees, et cetera, who've been unable to find work in the past, now they can get a job. And those jobs, yes, aren't paying a huge amount, but it is the beginning of their opportunity ladder. And I think, I really just can't imagine that people are going to want to throw all that away.
Well, it would be crazy. But I agree with you. I don't know why the Republicans are not mentioning anything except this economy and the fact that they're going to keep it going. I think if they do that, that's why I'm predicting against the poll numbers, they're going to hang on by 2-3 seats, maybe 5. Because why would you jeopardize this? I mean, what you said, Liz, is so right. I mean, the level of optimism, you cannot underestimate what optimism means for small businesses. Because if you're in fear, if you're afraid of the future, if you don't think things are going well, if you're concerned about economic growth and the ability for people to spend money in any variety of ways, then you're simply not going to invest and grow your company. Now, you can take a tiny company like ours, right? I have a small company, a couple of employees, very tiny. But we're so optimistic that we're buying a radio station in Richmond. We're investing in new equipment. We're going to hire somebody October 1st. There's no way we would have done any of these things under Obama. No way, right?
Congratulations and on all of that. And it is a very good signal about how you're viewing the future. And there are millions like you doing the same, voting with their feet. They're basically going out and plunking down their capital in making those kinds of decisions. And by the way, also there was a number out yesterday for applications for new business startups, which was over 800,000, blew past any former record. And I sort of think that's partly because social media is making it pretty easy to start up new businesses, but it was still an eye-popping result. And again, it all is about optimism. So I got to tell you, I hope your listeners are paying attention to this. If Trump, if the House goes Democratic, there is no question they will move to impeach the president. If that happens, just forget this ride of good times, because it will end.
It'll be a disaster. And in our business, the radio business is funded by advertising, right? I mean, that's how we fund our business. You need to get advertising revenue. And if retailers that might want a radio audience to advertise, if they're not optimistic, if they see the future as dim, if they're not getting the sales in their locations or their products or services that they want, then the first thing they cut is advertising. And then that rolls down to media.
Sure.
And so if everybody is optimistic, and so the retailer that you call on for the advertising is optimistic about his sales flow or her in the future, then they want to get more customers. They're going to have the money to advertise. So that's where, when you look at optimism in small businesses, the driver of this, right?
Yeah.
It's driving everything.
But by the way, it's not limited to small business. I mean, guys in the C-suites of big companies, they also were intimidated by the Obama White House.
Right.
I know a lot of those people, and they really, they wouldn't say it out loud, but they were very nervous that the zealots in the Obama White House, not one of which had a private enterprise background, basically viewed profits as a four-letter word, were always on the lookout for some new regulation to bolster their political credentials, but even in spite of what damage it might do to the economy. That is what was so troubling. And I think Trump, more needs to be said about the rules and regulations that he's rolled back, because the Democrats portray that as, oh my gosh, he wants dirtier water and, babies at risk of tainted milk and all this stuff. It's such utter hogwash. What the rollback has been things that were basically overreach, things like the Clean Power Act, which the Supreme Court stepped in the way of because it was going to refigure, 1/6 of the economy, just as Obamacare had done, without the advice and consent of Congress. I mean, it was ridiculous. And it was also damaging. It was going to raise electricity costs, just as California's clean power mandate is going to wildly raise that state's electricity costs. I really can't imagine why any young person starting out, would move to California or to some of these blue states where higher power charges are a given, higher taxes are a given, higher health care costs are the same, higher housing. I mean, if you, look at the sort of fees and charges imposed on people in these blue states because of political mismanagement and ideology, it is wild.
So what's happening in a lot of the red states, or the so-called swing states, are that voters, liberal Democratic voters in these blue states, are fleeing their states because of the governmental policies that they voted in. I mean, this is what's ironic to me. You live in New York, you vote all these people in, you vote yourself taxed to death, you vote yourself sanctuary cities, you vote all this, and then you hate it, and then you move to Virginia, and now you're doing the same thing. So then what are you going to do? Then you're going to move to Florida.
Crow. How in the world could the residents of Florida, and I mean, in fact, I'm going to do some work on this because I cannot understand how this could possibly be in anyone's mind. Everyone in New York, where I am, if they have 2 cents to rub together, they want to go to Florida. Why? Because it's a great state. It's a much younger state than is generally portrayed as growing, and the tax situation is completely acceptable. And what do the Florida residents do? They're about to vote it seems that they might elect this progressive African-American candidate for governor who could just completely undo all of that. I honestly, my head is exploding. I cannot understand it at all.
It's crazy. No question about it. And again, they're fleeing the states because of the policies that they voted in. Now they're moving to another state to vote the same policies in.
Exactly.
I mean, they're going to run out of states to leave.
That's where New Zealand comes in, I think.
It's mind-boggling, Liz Peek. No question. We're with Liz Peek. She's a financial writer. She's an author. She's also a columnist for The Hill. You can read Liz Peek at thehill.com. You can also follow her on Twitter at Liz Peek, or read all of her columns on lizpeek.com, lizpeek.com. Liz, I agree with you 100% on the midterms. I don't know why the Republicans are talking about anything else other than this economy, the jobs. I mean, every day you get another statistic that comes out that's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, in a way, Republicans are being hoisted on their own petard in the sense that, up until 2 years ago, the economy and job availability was like the number one concern for Americans. Every survey showed that, Gallup, Pew Research, whatever. It was always jobs in the economy. Well, now that isn't so much a concern for everybody. Everyone's assuming that these great jobs are here. They're going to be here to stay. Now, a lot of people are going back to health care, and I think Republicans have totally bobbled the health care thing. They obviously looked idiotic going through the whole congressional process last year. Really not the president's fault. I think he provided what leadership he could. It just didn't get done. But in the wake of that, the Congress didn't reboot and say, okay, here is our new message, here is our new approach on health care, because they've done some good things on health care, but they haven't in terms of offering skinnier programs and policies that work for a lot of Americans who aren't like men or don't need this, that, or the other thing, but they want to have sort of catastrophic coverage. those policies have been demeaned and derided by Democrats, and Republicans have not stepped up and explained what they're doing very well. I really think it's a question of messaging and also a policy failure. But that, unfortunately, healthcare seems to be a real cudgel that the Democrats are using, and Republicans are just not doing a very good job of countering it.
Oh, they're doing a horrific job, as always. And
it's true.
It's always. I mean, both parties actually are doing a horrible job. I mean, I think, look, if I'm running the Democratic Party right now and I was in charge of all of their messaging, I would win 50 seats. No question about it. Because I would run everybody to the right. I would say I'm going to continue the Trump economy and check all the stuff that's going on that you don't like, but the economy is going to be bigger. I mean, if you look at historical trend, if you look at the number of retirements, if you look at math and history, the Democrats should win 50 seats. But they're snatching defeat from the jaws of victory because you got Tom Perez running around, the chairman, saying that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is the new face of the Democratic Party, and she's a socialist. You got this other socialist you said in Florida. You got this other one that won in Massachusetts. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is now the face of the Democratic Party, and that, people don't want that. We have rejected that. We rejected McGovern, Mondale. They don't want that.
Well, I hope they don't want it. I'm worried about the younger generation. I think they don't know what they want, and they're not very educated because why would they be? They've not learned nothing in college but the values and attractiveness of sharing economies like socialism. And so they are especially ignorant, and I really think it's true, about what capitalism means, how it works, how it is the most impartial arbiter of economic success and fortune. Unfortunately, the millennials are bigger, as we all know now, demographically than the boomers. They may not turn out as in big numbers, but, Obama's out there exhorting them to vote, and my guess is a lot of them will. So, I'm worried that that generation just doesn't really understand what they're asking for. And I wish we could send all of them to Europe so they could understand why France can't grow because of their constricting labor laws, why the UK all of a sudden polling for the National Health Service is at an all-time low, and people are literally being outsourced to Calais in France to get knee operations. It's because these programs over the long haul do not work. Incredible. They have a shortage of doctors in the UK, which is what we'll have here too if we go to Medicare for all. Programs don't work. So, we don't spend any time in our schools lauding what has been achieved in the United States. That is a fair statement. All we do in schools is try and tear down the United States, talk about the problems we've had, the issues we've had, focused on race mainly and other, and gender issues. It is such a bogus representation of the success of our country, and it infuriates me, and it really places an enormous responsibility at the family dining table. Families have got to talk to their kids, particularly families that came from other countries, and realize what we have here that's special, why it works. Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty darn good.
Liz, where'd you go to high school?
I went to a private boarding school in Connecticut.
Where'd you go to college?
Wellesley College, where Hillary Rodham went.
Very interesting. I went to public high school in Madison, New Jersey, and we were taught about the greatness of America. I went to college for both undergraduate and graduate at Fairleigh Dickinson University, which had a very conservative economics department at the time, I learned a lot, and really one of the best schools out there. I had a great education there. I draw on that every day. Plus, I played baseball there, and I was a pretty good hitter. So I got all good memories, and I was a relief pitcher. But I'm out of time. I got to go. Liz, thank you for that trip down memory lane. Liz Peek, you can follow her at Liz Peek. Read her columns on the Hill, hill.com. Or you can get everything at your fingers, lizpeek.com. John Fredericks Radio Network.